Hello and welcome back to the Cupcake Jemma channel with me, Gemma, at home. Today, I'm going to be making New York cookies. I know this is normally a thing that we do over at the shop or at the bakery, but I'm actually baking some New York cookies for a bake sale that I'm doing, which is happening just local to me to raise some money for charity. I thought it might be nice to share the recipe with you because I think these cookies are delicious. They are a Knafeh inspired New York cookie. I'm probably saying it wrong. Anyone out there, feel free to correct me and the rest of us. But Knafeh is a Middle Eastern dessert. You can find it all over the Middle East. It's called different things in different parts of the Middle East, but I only know it as Knafeh. It's basically shredded phyllo pastry or kunafa wrapped around, which is like it's drenched in ghee, which is clarified butter. So like thing one, that's fit. And then you make a layer of that, and then you make a layer of really stretchy cheese. There's a couple that you can use, but the one I'm using today is Akkawi. Again, probably saying that wrong. So you put the cheese in, and then you make another layer of this kunafa pastry, and then you bake it, or you can do it on the hob as well. Anyway, the crux of it is, when it's finished, you serve it warm, and you get a slice of this like crisp, buttery pastry, all sort of like vermicelli-like, and this ridiculously stretchy cheese with a sort of slight saltiness to it. It's a little bit like halloumi, but more stretchy. Halloumi is not as stretchy as this stuff. I'm really lucky in Hove because I have a few actually, but a really brilliant Middle Eastern supermarket near me. So I called them up and I was like, have you got any Akkawi cheese? And they were like, yeah, and more besides. And I picked some up. It's a little bit of a tricky cheese to prepare, and I'll go through that a little bit later. But essentially, this New York cookie is going to be inspired by that dessert. So we're going to have all the elements, I hope, of that dessert, plus a couple extra just to really like boost the vibes. And I really want to share it with you because it's so tasty, and I really want you to give it a go and enjoy this incredible dessert in a new and exciting way, guys. So let's crack on. So I am just going to talk a little bit quickly about the cheese. It starts off as a really sort of firm, salty cheese, and it's way too salty. I mean, quite frankly, it's just too salty to eat just straight up, for me anyway. I had to soak it first, and I do recommend doing this. It's a little bit difficult to come by unless you've got a great Middle Eastern supermarket near you. You can use a mixture of mozzarella. I saw some recipes using like mozzarella and feta, a mixture of the two, so to get the stretch and a bit of the salt. But I highly recommend finding the right cheese because it does have quite a unique stretch, and then it also, when it cools down, as it will with a cookie eventually, it doesn't go like hard, and you know, like when halloumi gets cooked and then cools down, it's like inedible and squeaky and horrible. So this does not do that, but you do have to process it a little bit first. So what I did was I cut it into slabs, 1.5 centimeters thick, and then I washed it and I put it into a Tupperware just with cold water, and then I soaked it. I did it overnight actually. I did change the water actually every couple of hours, not through the night obviously. I mean, I love you guys, but I'm not setting my alarm for that. But I did change the water, so it probably soaked for about, I'd say 12 hours. You could get away with fewer hours if you want, if you're in a rush. And when it was ready, I rinsed all that salty water off. It had gone from being quite firm to being quite flexible and squishy. Then I grated it. Then, because it's also then full of water by that point, you then need to get rid of some of that water. So I grated it, I put it between quite a few layers of kitchen paper, or you could use a tea towel if you want, and I weighed it down just with a slate and then my ridiculously heavy pestle and mortar. And that got rid of quite a lot of the moisture. I mean, it still is a little bit moist, and maybe I could have done it for a bit longer. I don't know, but I wanted to crack on, you know? So what we've got here is that grated cheese, and that's gonna go inside the cookie balls, but we don't need to, you know, like with other recipes, we don't need to freeze it or anything like that. Just gonna shove it in. So of course, the first thing we always do with cookies is get the butter and the sugar up close and personal. And the butter is always gonna be fridge cold. And if it's not, you might find that your cookies spread a little bit too much. So I'm just gonna pop that in. I've got 230 grams of butter, and then I've got 160 grams of caster sugar and 160 grams of, what's it called? Of light brown sugar. And that's gonna go in as well. And then I'm gonna get that mixing on quite a low speed just to break the butter up a little bit. Currently it's in quite chunky nuggets. I just wanna break those nuggets up a little. Right, butter's breaking up nicely. Now it's time to add the additions, and there's quite a lot going in. So I've got some good quality white chocolate, 100 grams of that. I've also got 100 grams of caramelised white chocolate that I had left over. I've also got these beautiful chopped medjool dates. These are from Palestine. I bought them from my Middle Eastern supermarket, of course. Always check where your dates are from. I've also got 80-ish grams of chopped pistachio nuts, just for a bit of extra texture. Slung in another 20 grams of the Knafeh pastry, there's gonna be some inside, outside. Let's get it all over the place. So I'm gonna put all of those in and then just fold those together briefly, just till it's crumbly and rumbly. When we have a chunky rubble with all the additions, it's time to add the dry ingredients. So I've got 500 grams of plain flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and a teaspoon of sea salt. On a low speed, just get that mixing until a sandy consistency happens. Meanwhile, you can whisk your eggs. I'm using 2 large eggs and egg yolk with a little bit of vanilla, and then just add that along. And then you want to be quite brief with this mix now. You want it to be still quite craggy and nuggety. So of course, we always dump it out onto the counter. I've got my trusty scales here because normally we weigh out 125 grams for our cookies in the store because they are going to have a filling. I'm making these a little bit smaller, not by very much, but they're going to be about 110, 115 grams each before I put the filling in. I like to use gloves because, you know, mess. And then just weigh out your chunks and then very gently just gather it up. And while it's sort of smushed, you want to get your thumb in there and create a little pocket, and that's where the cheese is going to go. So I've got my cheese here. I'm just going to grab a little pinchful. It probably equates to like 15 grams, maybe 20 at a push. I'm just guessing here. And then, so when you've got the cheese in, you want to carefully close that up and then a little clunk clunk. Now, I'm also going to roll this in the Knafeh pastry just to give it a little bit of extra crunch and also to give it that unmistakable kind of kunafa look. So this is a very satisfying part of the process. And then pop it into a tray so you can freeze it later and keep going. Right, that's all my balls. With that amount for each one, I managed to make 14, which is great. That's 2 extra than normal. And I'm just gonna freeze these. These need to be frozen for at least 4 hours, as you know, or preferably overnight. So of course, once they are completely frozen solid, you need to get your oven preheated. Usually it's 290 degrees C, and you bake those frozen balls for 16 minutes. I found my freezer is super cold, much colder than the ones at work, and so they weren't spreading as much as I'd like. So what I have done is I've dropped the temperature down to about 170, and I'm baking those for 20 to 22 minutes rather than the 16, just to bake them a bit lower and slower, and they do spread a little bit more. Now, while my cookies were baking in the oven, I made something called an Atar. Again, correct me if I'm pronouncing that wrong. It's the syrup, which is traditionally like drenching a kunafa. It's used on loads of different Middle Eastern desserts as well, like things like baklava. The way that I made mine was I used about 160 grams of caster sugar, added 80 grams of water, and just put that over just a medium heat, giving it a stir every now and then just to dissolve the sugar. And then I let that come to a boil. Once it was boiling, I added a tablespoon of lemon juice and then had that on a sort of medium heat bubbling away for about 5 minutes. And then I took it off the heat and I added a tablespoon of orange blossom water. It smells a little bit like, well, to me it smells a little bit like my uncle's aftershave from the 80s, but in small quantities with lots of sugar, it's actually really quite a pleasant aroma and flavour. And you could even add rose water if you like, and a lot of recipes will do a combination of the two. I would keep it to 1 tablespoon in total because they are quite strong flavours, especially rose, and you don't want to go too crazy. So once the heat's off, just pop a tablespoon of your orange blossom water or your rose water into the mixture and just stir that, and then pour it into a jar and let it cool down completely. So it should be a sort of runny texture. While my cookies were still hot, I just grabbed a pastry brush and completely drenched my cookies in this syrup. And then while the syrup was still sticky and wet, I just sprinkled a little bit of chopped pistachio, just for that really kunafe-y, pistachio-y finish. And I think it looks great. Now, of course, you do have to wait for these to cool down at least 20 minutes or so because they're going to be molten inside. But you better off eating these when they are still slightly warm, because then you'll get that unmistakable Akkawi cheese stretch. So let's go. Right, I'm gonna have a bite. I've only had Knafeh. I don't actually know if I'm saying it right. I've only had that dessert once or twice in my life, and I remember it just being super stretchy and cheesy, but with that aromatic sort of floral thing going on from the syrup. And these cookies, while they're definitely not like an authentic representation of Knafeh, they have all the flavors that you would expect, plus more, like the dates and obviously the chocolate. I did and ah about whether to use like dark chocolate in these rather than white chocolate, but then I thought dark chocolate would really overpower all those other flavors, so I kept it really sort of neutral, which is one of the good things about white chocolate. I tried these on their own without the syrup, and it's just not quite the same. Like, you do need that syrup to really bring you back to the Knafeh flavor and that like true sort of Middle Eastern vibe. And the cheese inside, like obviously I soaked it a lot, and when it started it was like wincingly salty, and when I'd soaked it overnight it was much milder in saltiness, but there is a bit of saltiness, but it's got that lovely soft chewy, not chewy like gum but just a really pleasant cheesy chew, slightly salty, creamy as well. I think you could even do this, if you couldn't get hold of that cheese, you could even do this with like feta. It wouldn't have the same stretch, but it would have that nice sort of salty flavor going on inside. If you do want to try this with a blend of feta and mozzarella, I would highly recommend going through the same water extraction process as I did with the Akkawi cheese with the mozzarella, just because that is a very wet cheese as well. This is delicious, absolutely delicious, just really fragrant, got those lovely flavors, got those delicious medjool dates, which are so sort of sweet and toffee-like and chewy, wonderful pistachios, all that crispness from the Knafeh pastry. I love this. This is so good. Please let me know if you do make these. I would love to hear that you've made these ones, because this is a bit of a passion project for me, because obviously I'm doing this bake sale. Well, I will have done it by the time you watch this, but anyway, I really wanted to make something special and authentic for the fundraiser, and so I'm really pleased with these, guys. I hope you are too, and I wish you lots of luck making them, and yeah, let me know how you get on. And if there's a special regional dish that you would like me to cookify or cakeify, then please let me know in the comments below. I'm always up for a challenge. And yeah, I think these are a hit. Bye.